one of the problems was barracking for the bombers, because my name's Osama and I'm a proud bomber now, proud bomber member. But jokes aside, it's not a very footy loving audience, this one. The difficulty for me was coming to Australia not speaking English and not speaking Australian more than English, because there is it's more than the language itself, it's the culture. Early on, everyone starts saying, why don't you just assimilate or integrate, and those things can't happen overnight. You know, I've spent 13 years in Iran, and it was funny because I even talk about it in my memoir that when I came to Australia, one of the most weird things was that it was so quiet, because there was 8 years of war that I'd grown up in, and there was no one demonstrating. It was just eerie. It was so quiet. There was no war sirens, and as you know, as absurd as this may sound, it was unsettling, and it took a while to get used to that. So that was the initial difficulty, and then and nowadays the difficulty is getting people to treat my skin as a win. You know, so no longer. So that's the second part where I'm facing, where I talk on the phone and I'd say, "Oh, g'day mate, how you going? Yeah, I'll be there in a jiffy or whatever," and I rock up, and if I don't tell them my name, they're surprised.
The refugee is a time-based sort of thing. It's for 3 years or 2 years in your life, really, as far as I'm concerned. It's not a lifelong badge you carry for the rest of your time. And most of the refugees are future Australians. That's as simple as that. And just get on with it, really, you know. And within it, of course, you carry multiple layers within yourself. It's not tied into a nation state. I've lived in 3 continents plus in 4 other countries in my life. I carry all this experience, and all of that comes into my work.
I think the issue arises when we are only expected to speak of that
Absolutely.
particular narrative. Yeah. And I would also argue that refuginess, or the context of being in a state of refuginess, is something that you carry even throughout generations.
I don't wake up going to the shower going to the shower as a Muslim now, and I'm going to apply my shampoo as a Muslim, and I'm going to condition my hair as a Muslim, and then catch a tram and touch on my marquee as a Muslim. I don't do that. I do that as a person, as me. However, my work is a different thing. My work is informed by my experiences and past. So people tell stories that they know best, and I know the refugee story best, and I know the cultural shocks best, and best for myself, of course, not better than others. But so I use those experiences, and of course it creates a dialogue. When I make something and I tell people about my experiences, it creates a dialogue. So, because on a tram, often people would say, if I can go back where you came from, and that's cool. All right, I'll take your point, but it's a one-way thing. It's not a dialogue. So if he says, "Why don't you go back to where you come from?" then I'll tell him why. Then it becomes a question. It becomes a two-way thing.
If I can chime in on that as well. I think it depends on what context you're in, and that's where the empowerment of that, the potentiality of that term can come from. So I agree that it does inform our very existence, and if anything, it is a way of being. It's an ontology. Whether we like it or not, it's going to inform every part of our being, our breathing, our practice, our art, our research. But in saying that, I think there is power in where we choose to use this term. So, say if you're if you're based in what you would say your community, so I would say RISE, for example, I use that term. It is a term where you take it on and you walk with pride. And everyone has a different definition of what that multiplicity of refugee, asylum seeker means. But then if you're in, I guess, institutional white spaces, there's power in refusing to use that term. And in that refusal, you create a space still of dialogue, I would argue, in spaces like that. So it depends how and when you use that term.
Totally.
Okay, really. Oh,
Can I touch on that actually? Because when I was approached for this panel, actually one of the first things I said to Lena was like, whoa, I feel really uncomfortable about being on that panel. And part of it is because, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this, Tanya, actually. Because of the relative economic privilege that my family come from, when we came into this country, I was privileged enough to immediately have an international student visa. And international students are, the cash cows of a lot of education institutions in Australia. So I never had to formally seek asylum. You know what I mean? That my legal status was never as asylum seeker. My legal status was never as refugee, and that label was never applied to me. The first label that was applied to me was Asian, and the second one, international student. So it was interesting, kind of talking through that actually with Lena. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. For me, my family's economic privilege meant that the label of refugee and asylum seeker was never applied to me.